Welcome to episode 22 of the State Line Fast Break podcast. I am your host, Kasey Boone. Alongside me, as always, the great Josh Miller.
Here we go. The NBA season is now over and the wild off-season starts. Now we got trades. We got the draft round 1 tomorrow night. Let's jump right in.
The Oklahoma City Thunder have captured their first title in franchise history, defeating the Indiana Pacers Sunday night, as there was a horrific injury to Tyrese Haliburton, taking him out in the first quarter after he had started out the game. 3 of 4 from downtown, 9 points to lead the Pacers. The Pacers still fought hard for most of the game, even leading at halftime, but they just did not have enough. Turned the ball over left and right during that third quarter where the Oklahoma City Thunder blew it open. And then you had some McConnell moments that kind of kept them in it. But kind of once Haliburton went out, you realized exactly how this game was going to go down. The Thunder coasted throughout most of the second half, and they captured their first title. We obviously hope that Haliburton comes back strong from this and can return to the Pacers at some point in the future. It likely will not be next year, as he has already had surgery to repair that Achilles injury he suffered. For the Thunder, you captured the title that you had been looking for. Your MVP is now one of the few NBA players in league history to win the MVP and Finals MVP and win an NBA championship in the same season. Just a historic season from the Oklahoma City Thunder, ending in what they had strived to accomplish all year.
This Game 7 sort of epitomized the Oklahoma City Thunder's entire season, in my opinion, because they won games ugly. They turned the ball over. Points off turnovers is how this team is so good. It was an unfortunate injury to Tyrese Haliburton, but in their only other tough series, they played the Denver Nuggets, and we saw multiple injuries to the Denver Nuggets in that series. And the Oklahoma City Thunder, to their credit, stayed tremendously healthy throughout the playoff run. Obviously, they dealt with some injuries in the regular season, but come playoff time, no guys missed any games, and they just ran away with this Game 7 in the second half. And, you know, some of these guys on the Pacers gave it all they had. T.J. McConnell had a pretty good scoring game and really had a tremendous series by his standards, but ends up having about 7 turnovers, as he had to carry a lot more minutes than he usually would. And the Thunder took advantage of it. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with a playoff career high in assists with 12. And he shot the ball pretty poor. Early on was efficient. Second half, not so much. Ended up 8 of 27 and 2 of 12 from 3. But still got to the foul line 12 times and hit 11 of those, and ends up with 29, 12, and 2 blocks and a steal. You finally had Chet Holmgren show up in this Game 7, giving you 18 and 8. They needed that in a bad way, because he really has not done much for them this entire series, along with Kasey and Wallace, who hasn't given them much offense at all. Actually came in and gave them a good 10 points. So, you know, production from a number of guys, just like they've done all season long, and the best team in the league ends up winning the championship after a very dramatic playoffs and a very dramatic series. Shout out to the Pacers for even making it this far. I still will always consider this one of the more impressive playoff runs ever, because of what they've done and what they've done, how they've gotten here, with multiple game winners, being an underdog in each series that they've played in. And just very sad that Tyrese Haliburton goes down and tears his Achilles, but I think there's a newfound respect from all people on Tyrese Haliburton for even just gutting it out to even play, knowing that this could be the risk. And unfortunately, it did happen, and we're now seeing this with, I believe, 8 or 9 players this season alone with Achilles injuries, which is, I believe, the highest that we've seen. So that's extremely concerning going forward for the NBA, in my opinion. I mean, we saw Damian Lillard there in round 1. We saw Jason Tatum there in round 2. And now we have Tyrese Haliburton. You're talking about 2 for sure superstars. Dame's still a star in this league, all going down in crucial playoff moments. So really sad to see that because they're probably going to miss all of next season, and now the East is completely wide open. But I assumed the Thunder would win this series, did not think it would go 7, and that's only a credit to really how good this Pacers team is. And the Thunder, like I said, they only shot 40% from the field in this Game 7. They shot 27% from 3, 11 of 40, and they won the game going away. I mean, not many teams really in NBA history are capable of kind of doing the things that they do because of this historically great defense. We have to give our credit to them. And we talked about how Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was going to make a mark in history, and he did. And though he did not shoot the ball well, to get a playoff career high in assists in a Game 7, I just find that incredibly impressive, and never back down. You know, he was the main guy throughout this team, throughout this playoff run. Was every game great? No. But when it needed to be, he was, and he has now really cemented himself. And you mentioned sort of the things that he's done. You were pointing out all those things, and I give you credit. But even to add in something was that he got the scoring title on top of that, which has only been done, or, you know, to win a championship, MVP, finals MVP, and scoring title, I believe has only been done by 2 or 3 players in NBA history. So major jumps from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander throughout this season, and there's going to be people saying he's the best player in the league. I'm not going to go there. It's nothing to take away from Shai, but we're definitely starting to already see some people come out there and say it. So, but today I'm just going to give my credit to the Oklahoma City Thunder and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for this tremendous season that they just put together.
Like you mentioned at one point, the turnover disparity in this game, 21 turnovers for the Pacers, 7 for the Thunder. That was the talking point going into it, who was going to turn the ball over. And that was going to play a key effect on who was to win this game. Obviously, the Pacers were out there point guard for majority of this game, so it's really hard to take the 21 turnovers and comprehend how that happened. But they were sloppy, especially in that third quarter alone, where they just turnover after turnover after turnover. And it just allowed Oklahoma City to do what they do best, get out and run, make plays in transition, put the pressure even further up court on the Pacers, and they weren't able to handle it, weren't set up to tackle that type of pressure that Oklahoma was providing without Tyrese Haliburton in the game. But I think the key in this game in particular was they finally had a Chet Holmgren game where he looked like he was playable on the court in these finals. And he had 18 and 8, so at 6 of 8 was efficient. Didn't kill you on the offensive side and on the glass like he had in several games. And on top of that, he had 5 blocks, which was just huge defensively. They hadn't really had that up to this point in the series in terms of that rim-protecting center that could keep the Pacers off the glass. And so that was, I think, the key thing for the Thunder to kind of weather a lot of the storm that the Pacers threw at them and what they had done well as a rim attack-first type of team. That was where Chet Holmgren needed to excel for most of the series, and they got it when he needed it most. And so that was just incredibly impressive in terms of what I saw in this game. Shai didn't have his best game per se, but like you mentioned, the assists. And, I mean, he still put up 29 points in a winner-go-home Game 7. And so you just got to tip your hat to how good the Thunder were all year. This is kind of what we had been expecting to see, as they were the best team, 68 wins, all that good stuff. And like you mentioned for the Pacers, they are likely staring down the luxury tax still. There's reports that they still plan to be pretty aggressive to continue to build this roster. They've been to the Eastern Conference Finals now back-to-back year, just went to the NBA Finals and were maybe an injury away from winning the title. With the way Haliburton was playing early in that game, there's no reason to say that the Pacers weren't a legit contender to win that game. He just took over early in that game. And so, look, if you're the Pacers, you got to continue to build this roster through. I don't think you're going to see any desperate moves at this point. Just considering the timeline that you are now on, you are missing your superstar player next year. And so there's no guarantee that you're going to be back to this point. It's going to be really difficult. You're going to have a lot of guys step up. It's great that they've got McConnell and Nemhart and some of these guys that can handle the ball and be primary creators for them, because they're going to need it desperately with the absence of Haliburton next year. But just an incredibly fun series, great basketball series. There's a little bit of dead air surrounding this game in particular just because it was so hyped up. Highest watched finals game since 2019, and then, boom, the air was let out of it in that first quarter. And so maybe not the intensity or energy you expected. But still a very fun series overall, fun playoffs, and the Thunder get it done.
Yeah, and like you said, it was a major dud feeling that Tyrese Haliburton actually goes down that early, especially after nailing 3 of his first 4 3-point attempts. When, he was really due for a 30-point game. He hadn't had one in this series up to this point, and he ends up really getting hot in that first quarter was just a sign that he was going to have one of those high-scoring games, and usually when he does have one of those games, they find a way to win. So it was very sad. I'm sure a lot of people turned it off, and it's hard to blame them because a lot of people were looking forward to it, and then, this one of the stars of the game in the league period goes down like that. It's just really sad and just kind of drops the excitement level overall. But we still have to give credit to the Thunder because the Pacers were not going to back down at all. And they led at the half. Andrew Nembhard hit a really tough step back there to end the half, which, it didn't shake the Thunder at all, though. So we just have to give credit. But that's why I say I just feel like this Game 7 sort of showcases what they've done all year long, and really what's one stat I want to leave this season with that the Thunder did throughout the regular season was only losing one single game to an Eastern Conference team up to this point with the Pacers. So, if you look at it from that perspective, the Pacers won 3 times the amount of games that had the Thunder had given up to the East the entire season. So, like I said, major credit to Rick Carlisle. I think this really boosts his resume just getting it to this point. Not that he really needed it. He's already considered one of the best coaches in basketball. But he's definitely going to be sitting at the top of that for the foreseeable future. As for Mark Daigneault gets his first championship, and Sam Presti, all the talk about him, not having a championship quite yet, he now can shut all those people up. And there's no telling what they're going to do. There was a report, and who knows? If you check Twitter right now, Kasey and I's Twitter, it's just rumor everywhere. But you have the Thunder with having 2 picks, which we'll get into here in a minute. The Thunder have 2 picks tomorrow night alone, and could they package those up and move up to get somebody? They also have Topic, who didn't play a single minute all year long, and he was they didn't take him in the lottery, I don't think, but he was heavily considered as a lottery pick, but with the injury slipped. So they can go out and get even better. They might lose some guys, but I don't think it's quite going to matter. They're still the heavy favorite to repeat. I believe they're sitting at plus 220 to repeat when I checked just before we started recording here. So heavy favorites going into next season as expected, which is mainly happens all the time after a team wins the championship. But especially as wide open as that Eastern Conference is now, with, like I said, Damian Lillard going to be out all year, Jason Tatum probably going to be out all year, and now Tyrese Haliburton going to be out all year, seemingly. So it's going to be incredibly entertaining to see what some of these teams have already seen Boston make a move. We'll see what happens going forward, but I think we should jump into sort of the talk of what we've tried to hit on the past couple of weeks and keeping up with the trade market, and it is exploding right now.
We saw the big one go down right before the game on Sunday. Kevin Durant headed to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, the number 10 overall pick in the 2025 draft. along with 5 second-round picks. The Rockets were considered one of the favorites throughout most of this offseason. They were one of the favorites if he was to get dealt at the deadline. This has landed in favor of Houston after weeks of serious negotiations, as Kevin Durant was traded on Sunday after he had reportedly knocked down several trades from teams including Cleveland, Denver were 2 teams that were surprise teams that were involved that KD shut down. And then obviously we know Minnesota was involved. And it's been reported that the Miami Heat would refuse to put in Haywood, Highsmith, Jaquez, Jovic, Ware, and were reluctant to give up 20. And so that was just never a serious suitor for Kevin Durant. And then it's reported from Gambadoro that the Spurs didn't even make an offer. So he lands with Houston, and the number 2 seed in the Western Conference now loading up to go after the number 1 seed who just won the title.
And for Miami, too, the only one I understand is Ware. All the other ones, I was very shocked to see kind of those reports. And who knows how true those really are. We may never know. But this is what Kevin Durant wanted. I actually give him a lot of credit for wanting to go to this team, because by no means are they, a guaranteed deal like he went to the Warriors. He went to a very good team. He has had the relationship with Ime Udoka, and they, like I said, they didn't give up quite. I mean, it's a pretty good package, but compared to the packages that he's been dealt for previously, it's by far the least amount. I mean, you give up Jalen Green, who is a young guy who you took to second overall, who's got tons of potential, but the Rockets didn't see his playoff success going forward based on what he did this year. Dylan Brooks, they'll miss him, but when it comes to playoff time, I don't trust his scoring. And then you give up some picks on top of that. So they get to keep Jabari Smith, who's a very similar kind of player. He can definitely help him out a lot. They keep Van Fleet, who's going to be their leader seemingly. You got Tari Eason, and, they might have to actually play Reed Shepherd some this year. So their offense was their concern this year. Well, you go out and get somebody who's capable of dropping or averaging about 25 to 28 points a game on 50, 40, 90. And we'll see if Reed Shepherd can jump back into that mix, because he's immediately going to bring you scoring. The only question with him is defense. So if I'm a Rockets fan, I'm thrilled to see this happen. And if I'm Kevin Durant, this is seemingly what he wanted. So he looked very happy when he was actually in public at, I believe, the Fanatics event or something like that, where he first learned the news when it actually broke, and he had a huge smile on his face. So I'm very excited as an NBA fan, as someone who's always enjoyed watching Kevin Durant, getting to see him do it again and it actually be at a team that's going to be contending. And, this can very well be a huge resume booster depending on what they actually end up doing.
In terms of what Phoenix got back, I think it's actually more than what I was expecting it to be. When the reporting the last few days before the trade happened was these offers are continuing to go, or Phoenix is having to listen to offers that are lower and lower just because Durant's declining certain teams and other teams are maybe not so interested. So getting back a player like Jalen Green, who's still super young, who had a good regular season, put up a good amount of points, and then just faltered off in the playoffs. That's going to be something he's going to have to gain consistency on. And then a guy like Dylan Brooks is the heartbeat of a team in a way. He provides a lot of toughness, a lot of grit. He does all the dirty work for a team. So a team like Houston, that they pride themselves on that, I think that is a loss. The number 10 pick in this draft, I think, is actually going to be pretty valuable when you look at the depth of the draft class. Maybe it wasn't as highly touted as some believed to be at one point, but I think there's a lot of talent throughout the first round in this draft, and I think that there's going to be teams, and Phoenix is going to be one of those at 10 that is going to come away with a good player. And so in terms of the Rockets, I think you're getting the best player in this deal. Your biggest weakness last year was you had just no half-court offense, especially in the playoffs. Durant is the ultimate half-court offensive player. He's not going to play out in transition with Amen Thompson, like what maybe Jalen Green could have done, but he instantly provides you a guy, like you said, that puts up 50, 40, almost 90 in almost every season that he's had in the last 10 years. And so that's a very big upgrade for your roster. I think Jalen Green's going to have a chance to flourish in Phoenix. He's going to be playing alongside Booker. We'll see how that fit works out. I think they can alleviate the pressure off of each other a little bit. I think what Jalen Green does well is attack the basket, which is maybe not Devin Booker's biggest strength. And so it'll be interesting to see. I'm a little more optimistic about how those guys can fit together, more than probably most people are. But the Suns probably did as good as they could have done considering the situation that they were in. And Houston, beneficiary of a player that is of Kevin Durant's caliber being available on the cheap. And we'll see how their season ends up next year. I don't know how many more moves they're going to be able to make, just considering the price that this roster is now starting to creep up on. You're going to have to pay Şengün and Amen Thompson coming soon. The Durant extension is likely to happen at some point, and so we'll just see how that all transpires. In terms of the rest of the offseason, we've had some more big moves occur right before the draft. Daniel Gafford signed a 3-year, $54 million that can be worth up to $60 million, re-signing with the Dallas Mavericks. That's an interesting dynamic. Most people might have expected him to get traded. It sounds like within this clause, it's not going to be one of those where he has to wait 6 months before he can be traded. I think he's going to be able to move right away, and so that's still something that I would monitor. And then we've had a few trades, and we'll kind of break these down all in one piece as we got to get to the draft here shortly. But the Boston Celtics have traded Drew Holiday to the Portland Trail Blazers for Anthony Simons and 2 second-round picks. And then we had another one today, just a couple hours ago, where the New Orleans Pelicans are sending C.J. McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, future second-round pick to the Washington Wizards for Jordan Poole, Sadiq Bey, pick 40. So these are all very impactful moves. It shakes up rosters, shakes up how their salary stands out. It signals that Boston is serious about moving around some of their players. Porzingis is likely to be moved by the time the draft starts tomorrow, based on all reporting today. I don't think we're anywhere near done with the moves that are going to occur before 8 o'clock on Wednesday night when pick 1 kicks off with the Dallas Mavericks on the clock. And so there's a very interesting 24 hours coming up that we're going to have a lot to dive into on the next episode.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. There's probably going to be multiple trades by the time this gets posted that we didn't even get to jump into. I'll start with the Dallas move of re-signing Gafford. Was pretty shocked to see that. Although if I'm a Dallas fan, I'm pretty ecstatic about that, wanting to keep him. So you still be able to keep Lively and Gafford, who play very well together, and you can spare those minutes. And then now you're going to add Cooper Flagg, get Anthony Davis back, hopefully most of the year. That's one of the best group of bigs you're going to see in the league, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. A lot of people saying they're going to go after a guy in Chris Paul. I think that would be perfect for them until they can get Kyrie back. And he surprisingly played 82 games this past year for your Spurs, which I thought was probably the most surprising stat I maybe have ever heard, for Chris Paul to play every game of the year in this stage of his career. But if they can get him, if I'm Dallas, I got to feel really good. The Celtics move really shocked me. Anthony Simons, not known as a great defender, but man, can he light it up. He's going to be another guy who's going to come in and chuck up a lot of threes, which is what they want. Drew Holiday didn't have quite as good a season as he has had in the past, but you get to throw him into the Trailblazers if they're going to. I assume they're keeping him this time. Who have just a plethora of perimeter defenders, and he's going to get to join in. That defense could be very very annoying to play with is the term I'll use, because they got Tumani Kamara, and then Thibault, I believe, opted back in, and now you bring in Drew Holiday, and then they have your guy Denny, who maybe isn't known as a defender, but he can be the offense for them, and their perimeter defense will be, like I said, pretty annoying. And then now we got McCollum, Olynyk to the Wizards. I don't really understand. I guess you salary purposes or whatever. Jordan Poole and Sadiq Bey to the Pelicans. I actually don't hate this for the Pelicans. I don't think either of these teams are very good. Actually, I was a little higher. I was going to be a little surprising and be pretty high on the Wizards, and by the time the season starts, I think I actually might be higher on them than most, but this sort of brings me back a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of McCollum at this stage. But Jordan Poole to Zion Williamson lobs, those will be fun. Those will be a lot of SportsCenter plays to watch. A lot of, if you watch NBA League Pass, the commercials, they love to show top 10 plays of the week. They'll be top 5 in those all the time together. So very interesting duo we'll get to see there. And Sadiq Bey, I've seen that guy score 50 points in a game before, so who knows what you can get with him. But lots going on. You probably know more about how this affects the salaries and all that, and that's probably what this is more about. I'm not as experienced on that side of it. But overall, just it seems like a lot of these teams are willing to move a lot of different players, and we're going to see more movement than maybe we ever have, as we just did throughout this past season, and it's not stopping now, and it's really just rapidly growing. I mean, we're getting alerts in the middle of the night about these trades happening, and they're going to continue probably tonight and even into tomorrow and probably throughout the summer.
I'm actually very intrigued by these last two trades. Obviously, I think it signals the Portland Trail Blazers are ready to kind of move forward with this young roster that they have and continue to push for a potential play-in spot. We saw the uprising they had in the back half of the season before kind of loafing it in to kind of improve their draft pick. Chauncey Billups is back on an extension. They believe in him as their head coach. And you mentioned all the guys on that roster, especially Denny Avdia. What he did this year was very impressive. And now they get somebody with championship pedigree, all defensive caliber talent. Obviously, I don't think he's that at this point in his career, but it's going to fit seamlessly right in with what they are trying to do. For the Boston Celtics, this is just clearly they're trying to free up money for the future. I don't expect Anthony Simons to be a long-term piece there. I think he's going to be a fun player for them this year, and a kind of a year that, not that it's a wasted year, but a year that you can be a little bit more experimental, and you don't necessarily have the backing and the expectations you had going into this year as title favorites. So fun deal there. And then in terms of what the Wizards did today, I'm not as high on Poole. It sounds like you are a little higher on him. I think this was incredibly brilliant from the Wizards. They only had to give up Sadiq Bey, and look, I think Sadiq Bey is a talented player like you do as well, but giving up somebody that's probably not going to be franchise altering at any point in a deal to get rid of over $100 million in additional money beyond just this year. They're going to have $100 million projected in cap space with this deal, getting McCollum on a one-year deal. And it signals to me that they are trying to put veteran guys around whoever they draft. Right now they sit at 6. They've been very active in trying to move up. McCollum could be great if they are trying to draft a guard or just continue to mentor Bub Carrington, who they already have on that roster, who will slide into that starting point guard role as of now with Poole leaving. And then you've got Chris Middleton, another veteran there that can mentor a guy like Ace Bailey if he was to fall.
Didn't he just opt in back to his contract?
Yeah, he will be back with Washington at this point, barring a future move. But that's a guy that can lead in veteranized locker room alongside McCollum that I think they're going to be excited to have. This is a Wizards team that I think wants to be better this year.
I'd like to see them make – I would love to see them make the play-in tournament in some sort, or at least entertain for it or be in contention for it. They got Carrington, who I think can actually be pretty good. Obviously, they took Sarr, who I actually do like him as well.
And Bilal Koulibaly coming out of France. He's
Yeah.
been there for a few years. I think he's really underrated in the NBA landscape.
And Middleton, I mean, he's just a solid guy to have. I mean, and we'll see. I'll tell you here in a little bit who I have them taking at 6 or at 7. No. Wizards at 6, Pelicans at 7. I'll tell you in a little bit who I have them taking there who could really help out their core. But they're going to be young, but they have a lot of talented pieces. I'm curious to see how McCollum fits in. Obviously, he's not what he used to be by any means, but he can still have a game here or there. So, but just for the Wizards overall, actually, if I was a Wizards fan, I wouldn't hate sort of the future that you have there.
Yeah, and I completely expect them to continue to try to put veterans around this young roster, show them what it's like to be a pro, and lead this roster maybe, like you said, in a down Eastern Conference. There's no reason to believe that the Wizards can't at least make a push at the play-in. Not saying they're going to be a 55-win team, but they could have a Pistons-like jump where they're all of a sudden they're in that play-in race, and they might make a little bit of noise, and they're going to be a tough out every time they step out onto the court. But in terms of now shifting gears, you've already mentioned a little bit about the draft. We expect so many crazy things to happen trade-wise. It would be just announced to us to continue to sit here and speculate on what that could be. We have an idea of maybe some players that could be available, but it's impossible to really know.
Is Porzingis going to be a Spur? We're going to jump into the draft. We're going to try and go through pick by pick here. It's going to be difficult to get through it all in time, so we're going to jump into some certain ones individually, but overall we're going to try and get through. We're going to go through each pick, and I'll say mine, he say his if we have some disagreements. Knowing Kasey, he's probably got some things that we're going to hear and be pretty shocked to hear, and then they're probably going to end up happening because based on sort of the sources he's got over there. But overall, I think it's going to be a very interesting draft. I don't have any trades personally in mind. I'll go ahead and preface with that. I know there's going to be trades, but they're just so complex. Didn't want to include them in here. But I believe you may have a couple in yours, to just preface with that. And, I'm not a complete expert on all of these guys. For the majority, I have a pretty good understanding of how they are as players or what they've been up to this point. Couple guys that just going through mocks, seeing different reports and all those things are all factored into my mock. So a couple guys I can't give extensive reports on just based on what's kind of betting odds and things like that are also sort of what I've looked at, because those things definitely fluctuate a lot. But I say we should go ahead and jump into it.
Yeah, kicking it right off, we're going to kick this off going pick for pick. I'll introduce the team, the draft slot, and then we'll go back and forth on who we think they're going to take there. If there's any trade proposals, which I will go ahead and say I've got one in mind. It's impossible to predict, but just for the fun of the exercise, I will go ahead and predict one trade for a move that I think a team and a player is trying to set up to happen. So we'll kick it right off. Dallas Mavericks are picking at number 1. I don't think we're going to have any deviation on this. For me, it'll be Cooper Flagg out of Duke, just the consensus number 1 overall pick.
Yeah, and we've touched on mostly this when the day it happened, lottery happened. We jumped in to discuss this. So if you want to hear our thoughts on Cooper Flagg going forward, I would date back to that episode. But yes, I'm with you. He's about minus 100,000, minus $1 million at this point on all betting odds. He is going number 1 to the Dallas Mavericks.
Kicking off number 2, the San Antonio Spurs. This is a no-brainer. You take the best player available, and it's a 1-2 draft in my opinion, and Dylan Harper should be the selection at number 2 out of Rutgers.
Yeah, this is a done deal. He's sitting, this odds have it's weirdly fluctuated, but have never dropped below anything that wasn't a lock, sitting at about minus 4,000 right now for Dylan Harper to be selected to the San Antonio Spurs. Very scary to see what he can become in the Western Conference, a part of a great organization like the Spurs. If I were you, I would be ecstatic to add him to my ball club.
Now, at number 3, I think this is where the draft really begins. They can go in so many different directions. I don't think that there are any consensus anywhere you look on who they should take, but I, in my opinion, will stick them with the best player available, and that is VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor.
I'm with you there. I believe this is about the last person I have betting odds for. Sitting at about minus 250 for VJ Edgecombe to go to the Sixers right now. A lot of smoke early on about Ace Bailey, and we're going to get into him in just a moment. But he's saying he doesn't want to go to the Sixers. So, but I'm not sure they were going to take him anyways. I have them selecting VJ Edgecombe out of Baylor as well.
Now at number 4 sits the Charlotte Hornets, which this is a draft pick that has been under, just like number 3, heavy speculation about who might be the pick or if this pick is up for a trade. And my mock, this is the spot that somebody comes up and grabs Ace Bailey. I project that right now. There's been a lot of smoke around maybe Washington coming up, New Orleans coming up after this recent trade. I don't think it takes either one of them out of that race, but to me, the team to look at is the one that's sitting right behind those two teams, the Brooklyn Nets. Ace Bailey played at Rutgers, so it's not too far from Brooklyn. That is something that I think his camp, with the way that they have been sitting out of pre-draft workouts and meetings and just not talking to a lot of teams, I think he is setting himself up to be drafted by a particular team, and I'm just speculating that it's going to be Brooklyn.
And that's about one of the 300 first-round picks Brooklyn has in this draft.
Yeah, and just to preface it for the rest of the draft, that would be number 8 for number 9. Or not number 8 for number 9, but number 4 for 8.
Yeah.
And then they get a pick later on down the road, which is 19 in this draft, and then they get a future first in this proposal that I have. Okay. So they'll get 8 and 19 for this pick.
Okay. I have got the man out of Texas, Trey Johnson, headed to Charlotte. Not real sure how this is going to fit defensively, but I think the Hornets maybe see him as best player available here, and he's going to immediately come in and be a good scorer, automatic from the mid-range area, and we'll see how him and LaMelo Ball are going to pair up together there in Charlotte.
That's definitely an interesting fit. And another player to note there's been a lot of smoke about Con Knippel in Charlotte, so that would be something that I would look at.
He is the favorite there to go number 4.
But I will take Trey Johnson at 5 in my mock to the Utah Jazz. Another team that there's so much smoke going around them right now. Tony Jones, who covers the Jazz for The Athletic, and Shams have both confirmed in the last few days that they are indeed shopping Sexton and Clarkson and John Collins. And so those teams are
roster.
Those players are available to teams, and this has been a pick that, do we know who's really making this pick? Is it Austin Ainge, their new president of basketball operations? Does Danny Ainge still have a heavy pulse? Justin Zanuck, I think, has a slightly different role. I think they lean to those guys as the 2 draft guys, but I think this is probably a team that's more conflicted than anybody, and I'm going to stick with Trey Johnson. It's been a guy that I've mocked there for a while. I think he fits what they need. They need scoring desperately. Obviously they need defense. They were one of the worst defensive teams in the league last year, but this is a true number 1 scoring type of threat that you could see growing into that role almost immediately with what they have on the roster. A guy that's getting heavy buzz here for whatever reason it may be, if it's smoke or if it's they have legit interest, but Fears is a guy that has gained significant traffic as a guy that could be number 5.
Yeah, he has. I've seen him on some betting odds as well. But I'm going to have Ace Bailey slotted at 5 here to the Jazz. A little skeptical now, knowing everything that's gone on. If the Ainges want to jump in, but I think this could be an easy fix to sort of fix some of the PR issues there with Ace Bailey, and they're going to see him definitely as the best offensive player available here. Who knows what they're going to do with their roster, but I believe they select Ace Bailey out of Rutgers to head to Utah.
At number 6 is the Washington Wizards. Again, we just talked about it a little bit in this exercise. I have them taking Jeremiah Fears after they just moved on from Jordan Poole. I think this could be a fit that could slide in there. It could be a little interesting how that dynamic works with Bub Carrington, but I think they could be very interested in pairing a top-flight point guard prospect with their recently drafted big man prospect in Alex Sarr.
That is very interesting, and I think I have one quite just as interesting in a guy who you've been down then back up on, and I've seen him sort of slotted in a bunch of different spots. But the reason I select Malawach here to the Wizards, maybe a little unique pick here, but I go with the impression that they're a little weak at the center position because I really view Sarr as more of a 4. I think this gives them the opportunity to take Malawach and play him at center and maybe move Alex Sarr to that 4 spot and maybe not have to let him worry as much about being that traditional center because Alex Sarr loves to be on that perimeter. So I do have Malawach going all the way at number 6 to Washington.
I am actually very intrigued by that idea. I agree with you. I think Sarr slots better as a true traditional 4. The only thing I would be concerned about is how much floor spacing are you truly getting from that front court. I don't think Malawach is going to have a significant offensive game besides the low post, but defensively, Sarr is a very good defensive player, and we project Malawach to be. And I'm actually gone higher on Malawach than my last big board that was posted. I will plan to have another one out when we release this podcast and the mock drafts that we have put together. But in terms of Malawach, that's who I have at number 7 to the Pelicans. I think they like Messi, but I think they can still use somebody that could be a true starting center and be impactful in many different ways. I'm not sure Messi is a starting caliber center in the league at this point, and this is a team that desperately needs front court help. The only thing that would give me pause about this is, again, it's that spacing issue. Can him and Zion play together? But who knows what Zion's future is in the league right now. And so I think you just take somebody that's high on your board that has high upside. And for me, that's Malawach.
And I believe the Pelicans are going to be sitting here and see this guy come up and say, regardless of what our roster looks like, we're going to have to take this guy. And I have Con Knippel selected to go here at 7 to the Pelicans. Too good of a player, too good of a shooter, like I said, he's going to be able to come in and be someone who can hit 40% of his threes. I just think the Pelicans are going to be too smart to sort of pass up on that. They also have the new GM, Joe Dumars, and they've already made a number of moves, as we just touched on earlier, and I just think they're going to continue to make smart moves. And this is where I have Con Knippel falling to at 7.
Yeah, I really like that fit. And I'm projecting Con Knippel here to 8 to Charlotte. I think Charlotte's only really considering to do a deal like the one that I have proposed if they know their guy, who I think Con Knippel would be the pick at 4 or 8, if they have a good sense that he's going to be there at 8. And so that's why, even though I think Con Knippel's probably a better fit with New Orleans than Malawach, due to just spacing concerns. But I think if you're Charlotte and you're making this type of move, you know your guy, and I believe that to be Con is still going to be there at 8.
See, I don't have the trade sitting here at 8, so I have Brooklyn selecting still at 8. And I have them going to get a point guard out of the SEC in Jeremiah Fears, who has really skyrocketed up the boards for ever since really the tournament ended. And I think they're going to look at him and give him a heavy workload alongside D'Angelo Russell there in Brooklyn, and somebody who can give them some long-term security there at the point guard position.
And that would be something I would have mocked similarly if I didn't have this mock trade going, because I believe that would push Ace and Trey down, which would be higher on Washington's board, and that would cause Fears to fall, and so there's just a ripple effect with these things. But To move on, number 9 with the Toronto Raptors, I think this is where you're going to get your big surprise. I believe this is going to be Noah Essingay, who just recently left his team overseas when they're going into the finals of their league to come over, watch his name get drafted. That leads me to believe he's a lock to be a lottery pick. And there's been a lot of speculation about the Raptors being interested in a guy like Essingay. He mentioned today that the players he models his game after, Siakam, Scotty Barnes, Kawhi Leonard. What do those 3 players have in common? They all played for the Toronto Raptors. And so that's what I have at number 9.
That does make me turn my head, especially knowing there was some question marks about why he was coming back. Probably wouldn't be coming back if he knew he wasn't a lottery pick, so that's very interesting that you throw that in.
I think I don't see a scenario where he falls out of the top 14.
And I do agree with you. I don't have him going till later, but I think the Raptors need some center play to go along with Jakob Poeltl. I've got them selecting Derek Queen out of Maryland to give them some help at that center position. He's too good, too talented for them to pass up on. And they've really been missing out on a center really since they had Gasol, in my opinion. So I think they take Derek Queen and they run.
Yeah, that's an interesting fit. He's a different type of center than Jakob Poeltl is, so I think they could end up playing together. Very intrigued by that pick for them. Now, number 10 is now owned by the Phoenix Suns, formerly the Houston Rockets, and weirdly enough, in our last mock, I picked the same guy for the Rockets as what I'm picking for the Suns. I have them getting Carter Bryant, the Arizona Wildcats, so he stays in the state of Arizona, moving from the Wildcats over to the Phoenix Suns.
I've got the same pick. I think most people really have this pick, and it was going to be the same even if the Rockets kept this pick. You touched on how talented of a player Carter Bryant was when we did our mock, reverse or the other draft thing that we did a couple weeks ago, and he's got tons of potential. And I think you throw him early into the mix in Phoenix, and he's going to go there at number 10. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, for me, if I'm Phoenix, I like Carter Bryant because he gives you that defensive piece that I don't think you really have on the roster right now. And then he can be a catch-and-shoot guy that can surround Jalen Green and Booker. 2 names that I would look at here, Joan Behringer, the center out of France, and Thomas Sorber, the center out of Georgetown. It's reported that Phoenix is looking to snag a center at some point, whether it's in the draft or free agency or through a trade. And so that, I think, is heavy at 14 or at 10 to be considered. Moving to number 11, with the recent trade, I think this works out well. I've got them projected to take Kasparas Jakubonis for the Portland Trail Blazers at number 11, the point guard, shooting guard, combo guard out of the Illinois Fighting Illini.
Okay, I'm very high on Kasparas. He might be probably in my top 3 favorite players in this draft. But I've actually got the guy who you had at number 9. I've got Noah Essingay still going in that lottery. But heading to the Portland Trail Blazers to go alongside some of the bigs that they've got in Donovan Clingan and DeAndre Ayton. I just think he can be somebody who you can probably start around day 1 considering what they've got on that roster. And I think he still falls in that lottery and goes there at number 11.
Moving on to number 12 is a guy that I think there's heavy mixed reactions. Some people either love him or they completely hate him. I think the Chicago Bulls are going to be looking to move on from Nikola Vucevic, and so I think this is the situation where they're going to prioritize another offensive big in Derek Queen, sliding out of the top 10, going to number 12 in my mock. I think Queen would be a very good fit with that current roster.
I really liked Kasparas to go here, but with the way Josh Giddey sort of finished the year, I don't think that's the direction they're going to go. I've actually got them taking the Georgia man, Asen Newell, to Chicago. Like you said, they're probably going to move on from Vucevic. He may not do some of the things he does, but he's going to immediately be able to come in and give some sort of impact. I do think he'll be more of a project player, but I think he can come in and give you some sort of impact. Don't have a lot of hope for the Bulls team, although I do like some of the pieces on their roster. I just think they're going to view Newell here as the best available, given they don't need another ball handler right now.
Moving on to number 13 is the Atlanta Hawks. I think they've got so much offensive talent surrounding this roster, whether it's Trae Young, Johnson. They just got Karis LeVert. I think they go with a defensive-minded player, someone who's going to be a Swiss Army knife, and Colin Murray-Boyles. I think he is the perfect fit there. You can slide him in next to those two guys. He can play that Draymond Green, be a Jeremy Shohan type of player where he's just affecting the game defensively, going to guard every team's best player, and is going to need a lot of offensive development, but can be somebody that can distribute the ball and play a role offensively, and I think that's perfect for what they are looking for.
I've got my guy Kasparis out of Illinois headed to Atlanta because I do expect them to really entertain the idea of trading Trae Young, whether if it's this summer or at the deadline. That's just how I kind of feel about how they feel about Trae Young. I just think they're going to grow tired of him and eventually move on, which they can have Kasparis as sort of insurance to be some that ball handler, that, high usage kind of guy that they can use. So I really would like to see Kasparis head to Atlanta, although we might not see the impact early on. But I think if they were to move on from Trae Young, which I think they will at some point, it could be a very good fit.
Now 14, we're back to the San Antonio Spurs, the only team in this draft with 2 lottery picks. Sitting at 14, this was before the Kristaps Porzingis news kind of came out that they were in talks with the Celtics. If that trade were to go through before the draft, I don't think this happens, but as of right now, I've got them taking Joe Behringer, the center out of France. I think he'd have at least some sort of connection to Wemby. He's been a fast riser amongst boards over the last 2 weeks or so, getting a lot of buzz out of his measurements from his pro day and stuff after his France season ended. So that's a guy that I think the Spurs can be interested in, and a guy that the Spurs have worked out. If they were to do Porzingis, I think they'd probably go with Cedric Coward or one of these wings that would still be available. But I think there's going to be interest for the Spurs at the big man position, whether it's Behringer, Danny Wolf, Sorber. I think there's some level of interest in Maxine Reynaud. And so that's what I'm looking at right now, assuming a Porzingis deal does not happen.
Yeah, I've got y'all taking a big as well. I'm going to take, I believe, the Georgetown man, Thomas Sorber. Learned a lot about him when we had our last draft deal, and I just don't see how y'all won't go big. Maybe even if you do take Porzingis, I see maybe still taking a big here, because you have that number 2 pick, so this is sort of just almost like a bonus pick, is how I believe they may look at it. And I do think they'll take a big, whether if it's Sorber or one of those other guys you mentioned, but I actually do have them taking Thomas Sorber there, who I think they believe will be able to play alongside Victor Wembanyama.
At some point with number 15, the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're going to have to make a decision on Isaiah Hartenstein. They're going to have to probably pay Chet Holmgren. I think this might be the worst kept secret in America. I think they're going to be eyeing Danny Wolf out of Michigan, the center. He's a very skillful big. He's a fun player to watch. If you've ever seen him play or evaluated him as a prospect, I think he would fit right in with the way that Oklahoma City plays their bigs and would replace that Hartenstein role eventually when they're pressed against that second apron and have to move on.
I did consider that, and that is in a number of mocks, and I really partially didn't put him there because I really hope that does not happen. That would be extremely scary to watch, I think, going forward. I've actually got Colin Murray-Boyles slotting to 15 to the Oklahoma City Thunder, who really don't need this pick by any means. I think they are going to like his defensive upside. Another big that they can throw in there. They're going to have a number of bigs next year because they're going to have Hartenstein next year. But I do think you having Danny Wolf is extremely intriguing if I were a Thunder fan, and I really hope that does not happen.
And now for the last one that we'll probably go super in-depth on, your Memphis Grizzlies. We wanted to press it out so we could talk about them. I got them taking one of my favorite players in this draft. I think you just lost Desmond Bane. He would become the perfect fit in that role. I have them taking Cedric Coward, who's a sniper from three. He's going to be a good defensive player. I think he would fill that Bane role very well. I don't know that maybe he's could be as good of a creator as what Bane has started to develop. He a little bit older prospect, so maybe not on Memphis's radar if they do decide to start tearing things down. But I think the talent and the skill set is exactly what you look for in today's game, and you just lost a player that has a similar skill set, so it could be a natural fill-in.
Yeah, that could definitely happen. I think they're probably going to be juggling a number of names. I've got my Memphis Grizzlies selecting the BYU guy in Igor Demon. Another, shooting guard, small forward kind of body that they'll look to play alongside KCP now. I do think we will make some sort of kind of move, whether if it's tomorrow or going forward. So this pick is kind of dependent on that. I considered us taking a big here. I don't think we will. I wouldn't be opposed to it, though. I do think we'll take who we think is most talented in Igor Demon, but a guy who I'm sure we'll both have coming. I will go ahead and put it out there. I want us to select Liam McNeely, and I will be ecstatic if that were to happen, but I do have us selecting Igor Demon.
And I have Igor Demon going number 17 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm assuming they're going to lose Alexander Walker, and so this could be a natural replacement for him.
That's a very good pick in my opinion. I've got them going with Joanne Behringer, the guy who you had going to the Spurs, because I don't know if they trust the long term with Gobert there. They're going to have to look for another big, so I've got them taking Joanne Behringer.
At number 18, I'm doing what you had them do. At number 6, I'm having Washington take that big that can play right next to Alex Sarr, and I'm having them take Thomas Sorber out of Georgetown.
I've got my guy here going to the Wizards and Liam McNeely. I hate to see him pass up on. I'd hate to see my Grizzlies pass up on him, but I just think the Wizards see him, think, man, we can really go get a very good young player and grab Liam McNeely.
At number 19, I have Charlotte taking a big. I have them taking Asa Newell. This is what they get out of this trade, moving down from 4 to 8. If they were to stick at 4, or even if they trade down from 4 to somewhere else within the top 5, 6, 7, 8, I could see them targeting Malawatch, like I think we would be interested in seeing to play on that roster, because they're likely to lose Mark Williams, but I'll take Asa Newell after this trade that I had proposed earlier.
Okay, so I still have, just so we're clear, I'm pick 19.
Yeah, this will be pick 19, likely okay. Brooklyn.
Okay, yeah, I've actually got your guy Cedric Coward going here. Another guy who I think they just think best available on their board at this point, given his age. And I think they could potentially move off of Cam Johnson at some point, and I think he could be someone who could maybe fill that role for him.
At 20, I think it's down to between two players that has been reported that Miami has significant interest in and have worked out multiple times. I will have them sticking with Rasheer Fleming to be more that wing player that you can stick next to Tyler Hero and Bam Adebayo. But I think you're going to go in a different direction, which will be the other player I would consider there.
Well, this is who the team I want Walter Clayton to go to, although that is not how I have it going.
Wow.
I really do, as someone who is going to support Walter Clayton going forward, I would like him to go here. I do think they're going to go with Will Riley, though.
At number 21, the Utah Jazz are coming up to make a selection. You can't have a NBA draft, mock draft, and not have a white guy going to Utah. This is where I have Liam McNeely slotted.
That would just be That would be very fitting.
You miss out on Cooper Flagg, the white guy you had dreamt of. You get bargain bin Cooper Flagg with Liam McNeely.
Oh, I believe was he on that same high school team?
I believe so, yeah.
I think I've actually got Maxine Raynaud headed to Utah with the impression, a lot of these picks I have the impression that I think certain guys are going to be moved. So another big they can throw in there if they lose either Kessler or Markkanen at some point, and Maxine Raynaud.
At number 22 with the Atlanta Hawks, I have them continuing to build out that wing position. I have them taking Nick Clifford out of Colorado State.
This pick here, I think, could very well win the draft for the Atlanta Hawks if it goes kind of how I think it will, with Kasparis at 13. I've got Danny Wolf here at 22.
That'd be a perfect replacement for Capella.
I think if the Hawks could, like I said, get Kasparis and Danny Wolf, I do think they'd be the winners of the night.
At 23 now with the New Orleans Pelicans, after they had just acquired this pick from the Indiana Pacers, I've got them taking a guard, which seems less likely now that the Poole trade has gone through, but I have them taking Jace Richardson, which I guess you can see kind of fitting into more the McCollum role. But that'll be an interesting dynamic, and if I had to redo, I might consider redoing that trade, or that pick now.
Yeah, I've got the exact same pick here. I've got Jace Richardson out of Michigan State headed to New Orleans. I do think it could still happen, although I did consider changing it. Thing with Jordan Poole, I mean, you just never know what you're going to get from him on a night-to-night basis. You could get 40 points. You might get 3 points and 6 turnovers on 1 of 10 shooting. So I think he can bring some stability, especially defensively there. And I've got them selecting Con Knipple at 7 and Jace Richardson at 23.
Moving on to number 24, the Oklahoma City Thunder. As if they need more talent that can just straight up shoot the lights out, they grab maybe the best shooter, or at least big game shooter in the entire draft, Walter Clayton Jr. here for me.
Oh my goodness, that would really piss me off if that happened. But who knows? If the Thunder could walk out with Walter Clayton Jr., I think.
In this proposal, I have them getting Danny Wolf and Walter Clayton.
Oh my gosh, that would. It'd be hard for me to go to bed tomorrow night if that were to happen.
Presti does it again.
I mean, I guess I shouldn't be shocked. I've actually got them taking Nick Clifford with the impression that they maybe lose a Wiggins or a Joe or one of those guys off their bench, and this guy could immediately walk in and sort of do some of the similar things.
At number 25, the Orlando Magic, who I think now have become one of the more intriguing teams in the entire league after acquiring Desmond Bane. I have them taking Maxine Raynaud, who would be a perfect big replacement, considering they're going to have to make some decisions moving forward, whether it's Wendell Carter or your guy Goga Batadze. What they're doing at the big position, I don't know, but I think Raynaud would be a perfect fit there.
I love Goga, and I've actually also got a big going here and a guy I believe you're pretty high on, who I'm sure you may have going in these next couple spots. And a man out of Creighton, Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's a tremendous defensive player and a guy, a 7-foot player who can pass the basketball. I do think they're going to need a long-term big, and they do lose pick 16 and gave it to us in that Bane trade. Still have pick 25 and still have an opportunity to grab one of the number of 5 or 6 bigs that could really, maybe more than that, could go in this first round.
At number 26 is the Brooklyn Nets. This is a very intriguing pick for me. I didn't have them taking a point guard earlier like you did, so I think this is the position where they take him, and it's a guy that I think should be drafted a lot higher than 26, but has made his way here. Nolan Traore out of France is a guy that I'm very high on, and if we weren't in the position to have Fox and Dylan Harper would be a guy that I'd be floating out at number 14 for the Spurs, but I have him here at 26 to Brooklyn. Seems like a perfect fit.
I've also got Nolan Traore here, and this is somebody who I think that could be packaged in a later deal at some point. Just a wild prediction based on how I had the early part of the draft going with Brooklyn. I've actually got the same pick here at 26, and Nolan Traore headed to Brooklyn.
At number 27 is the Brooklyn Nets. Back-to-back picks here to kind of close out the first round. I have them taking a combo forward out of Arkansas, Adu Thiero, with number 27, would be a defensive player that could fit alongside their current roster.
I've got Rasheer Fleming headed to Brooklyn, and like mentioned earlier, this is one of their many, many picks here, and I have them taking Rasheer Fleming.
At number 28, I have the guy you had just mentioned. They're going to need a replacement for Kristaps Porzingis. They're going to need a replacement likely for Luke Cornett. Ryan Kalkbrenner, a center for the Boston Celtics. I think that would be a home run at 28.
I think that would also be a home run, and I do think that's someone they're targeting. I just think he may be gone. I could maybe see them moving up to go and get one of these bigs. I have them taking Adu Thiero, who you just had, I believe, at 27. I've got Adu Thiero falling to 28, and you can actually get decent odds on him going in the first round, and that's something I may flirt with.
At 29 is the Phoenix Suns, who just made a massive Kevin Durant trade. I think they're going to be looking for wing help now. I see them going Hugo Gonzalez, the forward out of Spain.
I've got them taking North Carolina man Drake Powell headed to Phoenix at 29.
And to close it out, we got the Los Angeles Clippers. At pick 30, I've got them going Will Riley out of Illinois. They're going to need a scoring threat. You don't know what you're going to get out of Bogdanovich. I think he would fill that role that they were hoping to get when they made that trade.
I've got my favorite pick of the draft here at number 30, and a guy who I really hope has a successful career in Walter Clayton Jr. falling to pick 30. I think the Clippers just can't turn away from him, and they're not going to be able to have James Harden forever. So I've got Walter Clayton Jr. going with the last pick in the first round to the Los Angeles Clippers.
So that wraps up that mock draft. I think that was a very interesting exercise, and one that I think a lot of people are going to be interested to hear heading into the draft on Wednesday night. Are there any players that you want to particularly highlight before we kind of wrap up our thoughts on the draft?
Yeah, just a couple guys that we've already talked about, but you talked about Danny Wolf. You have him falling to the Thunder. I've got him going to the Hawks. I think he's someone who really could have a lot of success from going forward. I believe he was at FAU and then followed to Michigan with that coach. Guys who, I think are going to come in and be successful right off the bat is Con Knipple, obviously. Obviously, the top 2 or 3 guys I don't see bust out of 1 or 2. Edgecombe is a guy who I have slight bust potential on, although I wouldn't be the one to say it. There's just a number of guys. I'm really excited to see which one of these bigs really pan out. There's a lot of centers that I think are going to go in the first round, which I think is kind of good for the league to sort of to be able to even back out, as it's not necessarily a bigs man game anymore. I think this draft could help get back to that point with 5, 6, 7 centers really going, starting with I had Malawatch, Queen, and a number of other guys, but I've been really high on Kasparis. I think he's someone who, although does have bust potential, I think he's someone who also has very good, he's a high risk, high reward kind of pick. Like I said, a number of guys. I do want to conclude my thoughts with saying that I hope my Memphis Grizzlies select Liam McNeely, but would not mind for us to go get a big like a Danny Wolf. And if we were to trade up, I would love to go get a Con Knipple. That would be probably best case. With probably going to lose Luke Kennard, so we need another shooter. as we lost Bane as well. We're going to need some shooting. So I do hope that Liam McNeely falls in and we select him there at 16. And you've got a big, heavy night tomorrow knowing you're the only team with 2 lottery selections.
And I'm fired up that we're going to be adding Dylan Harper to the nucleus that we already have. Very excited about that. I think he's going to fit well with what we were trying to do. Just put extreme playmakers around Wemby and see what happens. But I'll just highlight a few wild cards. Malawach, Essengay, Kasparis, Behringer, Coward, McNeely, Traore. I think these are all guys that are super wild cards. They can go in a heavy range of different picks. Those are guys I'd keep an eye on. Rain Out is somebody that I'd also be very interested to see kind of where he went. Now we have a little bit of breaking news before we wrap up here from Mark Stein and Jake Fisher. The Atlanta Hawks have emerged as a serious trade suitor for Boston's Kristaps Porzingis. If Stein's reporting it, that's one guy amongst Shams and some of these other guys that everybody knows of that I would take what he says seriously. And so this news of Atlanta potentially going after Kristaps Porzingis is very intriguing for me. Him next to Trae Young and Johnson and Onyeka Okongwu, I think that would be something to look forward to in the Eastern Conference if they had the ability to close this deal out.
That would be extremely interesting and not something I would do if I were the Thunder or the Hawks, excuse me. I personally would want nothing to do with Porzingis at this point. As talented of a player he is, just too many injury concerns, and then this playoff run, he has some sort of mysterious illness. We have really gotten not much clarity on that situation.
There was a report today that he did an interview that said that his improved drastically and is not really feeling any of the symptoms about it. But I still don't know that there is a designated this was the cause of that issue.
That just raises a red flag to me personally. He's a tremendous player when playing. Really just didn't do much at all. Wasn't dependent for them as much at all this year. And then even the year before, he was in and out of the lineup. And so it's not something that I would want my team that I would support to go and get a guy in Porzingis.
Yeah, and it's very interesting in the world that we live in today where the two teams that are considered serious inquirers about this is the Atlanta Hawks, who already have a big in Onyeka Okongwu that they're high about, and the Spurs, who obviously have Wemby. Could you imagine a front court with Porzingis and Wembanyama, or one of them 7'6" and the other one 7'3"? That would just clog, and both of them can shoot from the logo, so that would be intriguing. But like you said, the injuries would scare me off as well. So that would be something that if I was the Spurs or the Hawks, I'd be weary about doing. It would depend on the package that they would have to give up. If you're the Spurs and you have to give up Harrison Barnes, I think there's no way you do that because of the floor spacing that Barnes provides, the veteran presence that he had for this roster this past year. I'm very excited about what he provides for this roster. Another piece of news is that Shams just went on a radio show just not too long ago and said that the Boston Celtics are listening and taking inquiries about a potential Jaylen Brown trade, and that's something that they are not turning people away from. Could Jaylen Brown be on the move this time tomorrow?
This would be incredibly internet-shattering news if Jaylen Brown was to move. Who knows where to, but that contract is heavy, mighty. I mean, I'm really not sure on the direction that they're going in here, but I trust. You also have new ownership, so that's another thing you got to sort of factor into all of this. I trust Brad Stevens and the decisions he's going to make. Jaylen Brown's been there since 2016, 2017. It would be very stunning to see that. But, I mean, in today's modern-day NBA where we got Luka Doncic getting traded and we've got Josh Kroenke, the Nuggets owner, saying, who knows what happens? We might have to trade Nikola Jokic. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? It seems like any player at this point, other than probably Victor Wembanyama and maybe 2 or 3 other guys, are just the only ones who aren't capable of even being traded. But that would really be stunning, and it would shake up the internet in a major, major way.
Just the notion that the players would agree to this new apron rules, and it just a detriment to the contracts that they're going to be handed out in the future, and they're going to see players get uprooted more and more often that probably do not want to be leaving their current situations. But that is going to wrap up this episode of the State Line Fast Break podcast. We appreciate y'all continuing to leave the support and feedback on these episodes. This was one that was really important for us to get out before the draft so we could give a chance to give our thoughts on how we see the draft going, give a little mock draft out there, and we needed to touch on the finals, which I think we all enjoyed, and the offseason is now upon us. Moves have been happening at a rapid pace, rumors and speculation just off the charts right now, and so it's an exciting time to look forward to. But again, leave us your feedback. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts and on social media at the State Line Fast Break Pod. This has been yet another episode, and we thank you for listening. And right after we hop off the podcast, we've got a breaking news. The Boston Celtics have traded Kristaps Porzingis to the Atlanta Hawks. They're getting back Georges Niang and a second-round pick. The Brooklyn Nets have jumped in as a third team. They have acquired a 22 pick in this year's draft, pick number 22, and Terrence Mann. The Hawks have gotten Kristaps Porzingis and a second-round pick. You have now traded away the 22 pick Georges Niang and a second-rounder for Kristaps if you are the Atlanta Hawks. To put him right next to what we just said and talked about right before we got off air, it's official. He's heading to Atlanta next to Onyeka Okongwu.
Right after we get off, this is what happens, and this just speaks to how wild this offseason is going to be. We're getting things happen at any given moment, and the Celtics get off of Kristaps Porzingis, which I actually think is pretty good for the Celtics. I mean, they don't really get anything back other than just losing his contract, and now Shams is reporting the Celtics are now out of the salary cap's second apron. So the Nets now pretty much have every single pick in the first round, and Atlanta adds another piece to whatever they have going on.
Brooklyn now has 5 first-round draft picks in this year alone. Now acquiring pick 22, they have all the ammunition to go up from pick 8 to pick 4, as I had proposed in our mock draft today. Interesting trade, interesting dynamic. This signals that Atlanta is ready to go and compete in that Eastern Conference, at least be competitive, try to make the playoffs. They don't have their first-round pick as it's swapped, owed to San Antonio next year. So if you're the Celtics or if you're the Hawks, why not make a move like this? And the Celtics now under the apron. Rumors about Jaylen Brown. What are they going to do with Derek White? Fascinating trade all the way around.
We might see Jaylen Brown traded before the night's over at this point. I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Their entire roster could be depleted other than Jason Tatum, who's probably going to miss the entire year next year.
But anyways, we wanted to jump back on here and give quick initial reactions to this trade. As I had already mentioned before, please leave us reviews on the podcast. Find us anywhere on social media and on any podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, at the State Line Fast Break Pod. This was a quick breaking news segment. We thank you for listening. Hopefully nothing else happens in the immediate aftermath of this podcast being recorded, because it's not going to be super practical to keep recording
but
these
who knows?
bits. Who knows? That's right. Anyways, thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.